You know, if you were to take a dart and a map of the United States, throw the dart aiming at the middle of the country, you'd probably come pretty close to hitting Imperial, Nebraska, which is where I'm heading right now. Todd Burpo lives there with his family. Todd and his wife had a son who became seriously ill a few years back and basically died in the hospital. And his friends and his family and his fellow church members prayed mightily for him, and he came back. He was one of those people who technically died in the hospital and came back. And he came back with an amazing story about the things he'd seen and the people he'd met. It became a best-selling book, New York Times bestseller, called Heaven is for Real. Well, I'm going to see Todd and his wife today because I want to talk to them not necessarily about their son's amazing story, but their amazing story. How they sustained themselves with prayer through that ordeal. You know, in that case, they got exactly what they were hoping and praying for. Their son was restored to them. But what about times when that doesn't happen? Does that mean prayer doesn't work? Does that mean prayer is a wish? It's the fundamental paradox of prayer, and the reason I've driven all the way out here to the middle of Nebraska, at the heart of the country, is to ask Todd Burpo that very question. So let's see what he has to say. A prayer you probably did not enjoy having to pray was when your son was so sick.
Yeah.
That's a different kind of prayer.
Yeah.
Would you talk to me about that experience when you're in the depths of that crisis? What role prayer played in that part of your life?
I was mad at God. I mean, I was sitting there like, God, it's like, this is too much. God, I tried to be faithful. I need you to interrupt now. I need you to do something now. And I can't wait on this answer to prayer. The choice is, am I going to run away from God or take this to God and run to God? And even though I was mad at God, I knew that the only direction to run that was worth running was towards Him. But God's faithfulness doesn't depend on our faithfulness. When I was yelling at God because, God, I might not be able to hold my son again, I found out from my son that Jesus was holding my son at the very time I was yelling at him. Mm-hmm. And when my son tells me that, and it gives me that confirmation, I found again that, you know, when God says He loves you, He even loves you through the hard times when you don't even think you're that lovable.
Mm-hmm.
We can't help. As mothers, we want to comfort, take care of. We provide all the needs. We put the bandage on the kid. Colton was past the stage of putting a bandage on. Mm-hmm. He was ill. I could not help him. And God's ultimate healer, he was either going to heal him there or heal him ultimately. I believe in the power of prayer, but then I also believe in the power of numbers. And so, you know, I was on the phone calling my parents are pastors, calling my sister, she has a church, my brother had a church, and, you know, just put them on every prayer chain and every person I knew that could pray.
Talk about the power of numbers, because I know the prayer chain is a fine tradition in the Christian church life. Why are the prayers of more than one person? And I don't want to use the word effectual, but why is it important for groups of people to combine in prayer for something?
Well, it says, you know, when 2 or 3 are gathered in my name,
mm-hmm.
you know, it says that. And when our voices are heard, even in praise, He loves to hear corporate worship. I mean, we can worship individually, but I think God is more pleased when we come together corporately. Same thing with prayer. He
mm-hmm. likes
to hear our prayers individually, but when we come together corporately or together as a group, He's like, all right.
I mean, when one of my kids comes up to me and says, Dad, thank you for taking care of us, you know what that makes me feel like? Appreciated, noticed. Wow, that kid said thank you, you know. And that's what God wants from us. Mm-hmm. And prayer, you know, more than anything, nurtures that dependence and that reality that God's with us. God, we know you're walking, we know you intervene, and we're acknowledging you.
When you enlisted all your friends and you prayed so fervently for Colton's return to you, that obviously that resulted in an outcome that you couldn't have been happier with. Years earlier, as you mentioned in the book, you suffered a miscarriage.
Yeah.
Which was probably had to be another extremely painful chapter.
Yeah.
And you probably prayed just as fervently for a different kind of outcome there that wasn't didn't turn out the way you wanted. How did you feel about prayer at that point? And looking back on the two events in your life.
I think sometimes when you pray a prayer, did God hear that or not? Well, 5 years later, he goes back and answers those prayers. Oh yeah, by the way, Mom, I have a sister in heaven, and this is what she's like. And we didn't even know what he was talking about until he started explaining that she had a baby die in her tummy. And then all of a sudden, those prayers that I prayed, that I couldn't have told you if God heard them or not, he confirmed 5 years later, oh yeah, I heard them. And I'm going to answer them right now.
Yeah.
There was no way 10 years ago I would say, you know, well, I'm going to have another child, and he's going to go take a trip to heaven and come back, and then we're going to write a book, and our experience of losing our daughter is going to help millions of people. But people today go, well, can't you see God? Well, now, but I couldn't then.
Look, I see it this way. God's got the master plan. I think I know I want this or I need this, and God goes, I got something better down the road. And especially with us losing our child. Does it still hurt? Yes. Are we sad? Yes. But we realize she's there. But we also have the comfort that Colton saw her. But then also we've been able to help people through our hurt. Way more than anything else. So that's been good.
Sonja and Todd, thank you for sharing your story.
No problem.
Thank you for sharing. When you drive west from Nebraska to Denver, which I'm doing right now, eventually you begin to get an image of the Rocky Mountains in the distance. You can see, on a clear day, you can see the snow on the top of the peaks and the shadow of the Front Range. And I wonder if that's something like what prayer is. It's something as far away as a 4-hour mountain range, and I don't know, it's as close as a pair of folded hands. So maybe that's part of what prayer is.